managing and protecting the world's grueling number of endpoints, enabling Tanium's customers to see, control, and protect every endpoint everywhere. Tanium's mission is to provide certainty in uncertain times with the industry's only converged endpoint management. Trusted by the U.S. military and the majority of the Fortune 100, Tanium helps manage and protect nearly 30 million endpoints. Tanium, the power of certainty. Visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more.
Picture your team being able to map out the external attack surface as it grows and see the same attack vectors as a hacker does. Most tools out there do asset discovery, but stop there. Enter Detectify. It takes an inventory of exposed web assets and automates vulnerability testing for security misconfigurations, expiring subdomains, and risks in third-party software. Here's the cool part. They crowdsource payloads from leading ethical hackers. It finds bugs you actually want to fix and finds them in time. Start a free 2-week trial by visiting securityweekly.com/Detectify. Go hack yourself. Attacks can't be prevented, but they can be stopped. Modern cyber attackers have already made it inside your network, but you have the upper hand. Find and eradicate threats with ExtraHop network detection and response, and shut them out before real damage is done. Learn the advanced techniques attackers are using and how ExtraHop stops them with a live attack simulation. Register at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. That's extra HOP.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover in one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions monthly and we'll reach out to you once reviewed. And it is time for the Enterprise Security Weekly news. You can go to securityweekly.com/ESW278 if you want to check out the stories. Probably not going to get to all of them today. Again, a ton of them here. Not even half of them funding, though. We do have some funding items, but not nearly as many as we've had in the past. And but before we jump in here, I just want to give some shout outs to some of the newsletters that helped me gather this stuff. I found some really good sources for news, and it's really cut down the amount of time it takes me to find some good stories for us to cover. And one of those is Security Funded by Mike Prevet. He's at returnonsecurity.com, and he does a really good job of collecting all the funding announcements and all the acquisition announcements. Previously, the newsletters I used for that were general VC stuff, so I would have to search through there for keywords to try and find all the security items. But he does all that work for me now, so I subscribe to the Security Funded newsletter, and that makes it way easier for me. And then the Risky Business News, which the prolific Caitlin Kimpanu compiles for Risky Business. I think he was previously at the Register, puts that together, and really good stuff in there. It's a little bit of everything. You get some industry stuff, you get some hacks, cybercrime, that kind of stuff. So really good newsletters in there that I highly recommend. All right. And anything that strikes you guys that we should start out with here? Or should we just start from the top?
I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait for me. I'll be back in a minute. I'm actually updating my newsletter feeds to include the awesome newsletters you just mentioned.
Yeah, Security Funded, I think you'll really like. He has like graphs and totals by segment. He does a lot of good work with that.
I actually know Mike Prevet's down here in the North Carolina area. I think he's closer to Charlotte. So actually, I've been communicating with him since his idea stage for that newsletter. I'm glad to see it's picking up traction. Yep.
Yeah. He's getting to the point where I don't know if he's doing it full time yet, but it seems like he's getting close. I've chatted with him a lot about it. But yeah, it's
the whole content creation thing is becoming real within the cybersecurity world. We just had on our podcast that I do on the side, we had Daniel Miesler from Unsupervised Learning on recently. We had Clint Gibler from TLDR. Yep. We're having additional influencers coming in the next couple of shows. This cyber content creation stuff's real. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. It's been interesting watching Miesler because he had the whole some kind of subscription service, right?
Yeah, they're both, I think, doing more subscription service. Daniel's leaning in for sure. The interesting thing, I mean, we did a background story on Daniel Miessler and unsupervised learning. He's started unsupervised learning essentially in 1996 as a dumping ground for all of his own personal musings and brain content. That's where it started. And so he has 20 plus years of interesting content creation that he's now finally getting to the point where he's monetizing. Talk about the long haul.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Looking at the stories here, there's a lot of attack surface management. So CyberInt raises $28 million. That's story number one there. I believe there's attack surface management. I did not test them when I tested a bunch of these companies, and I don't remember why I did not select them to test. But that's a really hot area.
Cyber threat intelligence. So it's data harvesting, dark web data harvesting, and autonomous analysis. So it bumps into attack surface, but it's almost like a hybrid of vulnerability, threat intelligence, etc., with attack surface management.
Yeah, so it's pretty. I consider so the dark web intelligence is basically what I refer to as data leak detection. So you're looking for anything on the dark web that matches something that should be secret or proprietary data for you, like an email address with your company's domain with a leaked password, for example. So using have I been pwned fits into that category, for example. Digital shadows fits into that category. And it varies how sophisticated they get here. Like Terbium Labs was a crazy approach where they would actually collect all this dark web and darknet data, and then they would hash it all, like not even at the file level, but at the pieces of data and files. And then they would do that with all your internal data. And so they'd have these two massive databases, this stuff that's been exposed externally, from private forums where they sell this data, from Tor, from all these different places. And then they'd try and do matches on your own proprietary data to see if anything's leaked, which I think they got acquired by somebody.
Yeah, but it's interesting, though. Really what you're talking about is more threat intel style stuff, and I think that's kind of what Katie was getting at. Attack surface management doesn't necessarily have to take into account threat intel stuff, although some of it tends to. But ASM, attack surface management, is literally about discovering what that attack surface could and should look like, not necessarily even mapping, threat intel to that surface. And so what I'm seeing, it's really interesting right now, is kind of a merging of a few different markets, right? The EASM markets, external attack surface management, which are your Randoris and others that are essentially looking at it from a hacker's vantage point, a scanner's vantage point, if you will. The internal cyber asset management market, which is the Axoniuses, the Jupiter Ones, the folks like that look at everything from an internal vantage point and discover everything you have through kind of more of a fully informed model, again, somewhat akin to like static analysis versus dynamic analysis, if we take those back to the AppSec days. And then what we're seeing is actually a bit of an overlay of some of the threat intel feeds into both of those spaces. I see all of that stuff unifying. It's got to unify soon, and it just has to kind of come into one thing. The other thing you could really throw into the mix here, and I just had a long conversation with an XDR analyst on this exact topic, is XDR is a similar vantage point. It's just endpoint derived instead of cloud derived. And it's basically discovering your attack surface from an endpoint vantage point is what a lot of the XDR people are even starting to merge some of their messaging into. I'm not as clean on that one. I don't love that one. But it's just such a weird combination of markets that are starting to pull together for cloud-centric security.
Well, it's interesting. Like I was doing some testing of Palo Alto's XDR product, and at a minimum for Cortex XDR, they want you to have endpoint data, cloud data, and network data. So from like a firewall in there. And then they had the identity pieces and other pieces you could add to it. But at a bare minimum, and none of those were prioritized over others, you would have cloud data, endpoint data, and firewall data. in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tyler, I totally agree with you. I think this is a tricky space because there are a lot of terms that are being merged and a lot of things are adjacent, and it's part of a bigger picture. I think probably at some point things will have to converge. I don't know if that becomes XDR or if it becomes something else. But looking at this, I wouldn't call it threat intelligence solely. I wouldn't call it external digital risk management solely or vulnerability management solely, but it encompasses all of those things. I would say it's less attack surface management than it is threat management or vulnerability management.
Yeah, so let me break down some of the use cases that I've seen when I've tested a bunch of these products. So, kind of the core of what I think of as external attack surface management is what Tyler was talking about, is I give you my company name and you tell me what's out there that could hurt me. Like there was one product I tested that would check and see if you had any mobile apps that used your brand or your company names. And sure enough, I found that there's a dedicated Security Weekly Android app, which I had no idea that existed. But I was testing it on CRA stuff, and that came up. But yeah, there's that stuff. It'll tell you if you've got this abandoned brochure server or subdomain takeovers, that kind of stuff. But then there's also digital risk protection, which is more detecting misuse of the brand. Somebody, like the most common misuse of a brand that you'd be looking for is somebody setting up phishing infrastructure. Maybe it's like a subtle misspelling of your company's name for a new domain that somebody just registered, and they're just now setting up the infrastructure to start a phishing campaign. So it's kind of its own category. You see, like CyberInt is in that category. Risk IQ was real big in that category as well. And then you've got the leak stuff. So any of my employees, have their creds been stolen? Has my company had any creds get stolen? Has any of my data leaked? Like if you look at GitGuardian, they're just looking for credentials in code bases. They're just looking in Bitbucket, GitLab, and the paid for GitHub, private GitHub, right? And just looking for API keys and hard-coded credentials. And I consider all that stuff external attack surface, but there's all these little subcategories.
You are 100% right, but I want to pull us back to a very important point. The fact that you found that Enterprise Security Weekly or the Security Weekly mobile app by Android, was there any risk to that mobile app? Because it's right there, installed on my phone, so I need to know if this is a bad thing.
Viewers want to know.
No, there weren't any critical risks in it. There were some like outdated libraries in it because it's actually, we don't create it. It's auto created for us by a third party that we use. And it's just part of the service for using Libsyn, which is that third party that we use, is they generate that out.
I feel so much safer now as I'm clicking uninstall.
Yeah, I mean, you can listen to us in any podcast. I don't know why you'd need a dedicated app for that. But yeah, the actual publisher on it was Libsyn. If you go and look at it in the App Store. So an interesting thing here, and this is kind of my number 3 story, is almost like trying to avoid the security debt and the tech debt in the first place. So they call it attack surface management, which is confusing because what they're doing is they're looking to strip stuff out through your code pipeline, your CI/CD pipeline, looking for stuff that doesn't actually get used in your app and stripping it out for you or recommending that you take the stuff out, where you've got extra libraries, extra functionality in there that's just extra attack surface that's going to cause you pain. So why not get it out of there? At least
this is RapidFort?
RapidFort, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea. I think one of the problems is we're seeing so many uses of different types of terms that it makes it confusing. It certainly makes it confusing for buyers. We're sitting here debating terms, and I guarantee you, if you ask some of our listeners what they thought of these terms, you'd get slightly different answers from almost everybody. And it's really hard, I think, as a buyer to try to navigate the vendor market when you are looking for products when this happens. It's not necessarily the vendor's fault just on their own. I could, and oh, my video went away. Sorry about that. There are many things that contribute to this problem. But the fact of the matter is this may or may not be attack surface management, but the premise behind it is still valid.
Yes. So this exact same feature, or not this exact same feature, but a similar feature, and I forget if it was Twistlock or Aqua, one of you might remember, had a feature where you could run your containers in like a test environment, and it would keep track of what got used in that container. So say if netcat got used, but not with the -L flag, then when it was in production, you couldn't use the -L flag. So basically it locked down and kind of made your container immutable to only the things that were used when you were training the, execution model for it, for lack of a better term. So like if there was some kind of vulnerable library in there, but you didn't use it, there'd be no way to exploit it in production because it would prevent execution or any use of that library because when you trained it, it didn't get used. So a little bit different. It doesn't actually strip it out, doesn't get rid of it. But, and I can't remember if that was Twistlock or Aqua, it would prevent you from using anything that wasn't used when you trained it.
Yeah, I'm more concerned not necessarily with how the functionality operates in this particular case, because I think it's serving a need and it's interesting and it could be potentially useful. I just think that the marketing is not very good for it because it's not attack surface. You're blending markets that make no sense whatsoever. You're blending a term used for not even remotely close to AppSec and trying to hijack it into AppSec. I just think it's a pretty poor marketing execution on that side of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's hard. It's hard. It's definitely, I recommend running this kind of stuff by an analyst or somebody that knows the market well. Just send your story to us. We'll cover it. If you do it badly, we'll let you know. It's a service we provide. Yeah, and speaking of stuff that marketing press releases that need help, number 7, the title of this is Kryptos raises U.S. So right there's a key that this is somebody that's maybe not a native English speaker or not in the U.S. They put U.S. before the $sign. So it says U.S. 3.1 million to address sensitive data breach. And to my native English ears, what that sounds like is they're raising money to pay for a breach that they experienced. But what
100%, that's what I read.
What they're actually trying to say is that they're a vendor that does data security, data protection, and they can prevent your sensitive data from being breached. But that's not at all what this title reads like.
I have more sympathy for this
than
I do for the pilfering of terms.
Yes.
Oh,
definitely.
No, there goes my camera again. Sorry, guys. I have more sympathy for this.
Yeah,
for sure.
No, I'm not saying I don't have sympathy.
And look, they have a reasonable raise here, 3.1 million. At least they're trying, but maybe they're not at professional PR stage.
Yeah. No, this is a seed round. I'm pretty sure. 3.1. I mean, could be anything. We've got rounds here that are just all over the place. In both stage and amount, but they're pretty early stage, and they are definitely part of this new emergence we're seeing of data security companies that are kind of taking another stab at DLP is going to be a component of this. You have to detect, or you have to discover the data first, and then once you get to that classification or categorization, that's where I'm kind of eager to see how these companies do, because the last round did not do well in terms of false positives when trying to classify information. using any kind of automated means. So very interested to see how these companies do. But yeah, primarily Spanish-speaking company. So very cool to see. I work for a company that's headquartered out of Latin America. So very cool to see more companies headquartered out of Latin America. Or they're actually headquartered in California, but
California.
Yeah. It's the culture doesn't necessarily stop at political borders, right? Let's see what else here is worth talking about. So number 5 was a weird one. I have no idea what to do with this. I'll read the subtitle here is Global venture capital funds invest in Kitchener-Waterloo-based quantum-safe cybersecurity company to propel product development and grow international sales. It's not exactly what I wanted to read. They had a synopsis of the product, and it was something about discovering and managing your quantum products. Like people just have like this quantum product sprawl problem or something like that. Like it was the way it kind of sounded.
I remember years ago when I was running the content and the speakers for InfoSec World, we had a speaker, and this is going back some time, who year after year kept submitting a talk on quantum, and the selection committee for talks just kept saying, we're not ready, we're not ready, we're not ready. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I just want to keep saying that when I read this press release, great idea, we're not ready.
Yeah, I mean, the quote on their website says, quantum computers are coming and all our digital infrastructures are vulnerable. What they mean is potentially will be vulnerable because they're coming, they're not here yet.
Right. I mean, there probably is a big future for this. It's just not here yet.
I don't know. Are there companies out there using quantum? Like I know IBM has a service, quantum computer service, and you don't have to own the quantum computer. Just like IaaS or SaaS or PaaS model. Basically, you're just renting time.
How do you pronounce that? Quas?
Oh, with a Q, quantum computer as a service. Yeah, whatever the acronym is, you can rent time on a quantum computer. But I don't know of anybody that has their own on their own networks, that actually own these and are using them beyond like random, sources of entropy. I've seen quantum products for random number generation for sorts of randomization for an HSM or something where entropy is really important, good quality entropy, and no idea. But yeah, what they do is they protect your quantum computers, but I don't know anybody that has any. So,
I mean, and not even so much as not even knowing who has any, because I don't know anybody that has any either. But the real question is, how's the output any different than non-quantum compute? A little faster? A lot faster? If that's the only difference, then who cares?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the attack surface is, so I don't know what is it whatever interface that you use to, for input and output to the computer? I don't know enough about how quantum computers are being used currently to understand what they would be protecting and how. So, yeah. Might be cool to have somebody like an expert on quantum. I actually have somebody in mind that I've been thinking about bringing on the show on the show to interview about quantum computing and where it's at and when we need to start worrying about security about them. But Katie says it's too soon. So maybe we'll hold off on that.
Well played.
When we're ready, I do have somebody in mind. I follow somebody on
maybe
Twitter.
Maybe in 2025. I don't know. I'm just picking a date a couple of years in the future.
Yeah. So that one was interesting. Hit us up if you have any insight into why there's more than a half a dozen quantum security companies out there and whether or not there's any market for them to go after, we'd love to hear about that. So it looks like firmware security has competition now. Eclipsium was really the only company that I was aware of that was really hitting firmware security at the enterprise level. But there's another company now called, and this is story number 6, called Binarly, I guess is how you would pronounce that. Raised a $3.6 million seed round, and reading what they do, it sounds very similar to what the folks at Eclipsium are doing. They're doing their own research. They found a bunch of vulnerabilities in firmware, and they're building a product that allows you, that gives you visibility of firmware security issues in your environment.
Yeah, I think there were a couple companies that are touching this space, but Eclipsium, was the one I knew best as well. So, they're an amazing company, but not bad to see some competition in the space, because it's an important thing that I think is overlooked quite a lot. It's not the sexiest thing, except maybe to Paul. I don't know. Apologies, Paul, if I just insulted your new job. But super important, and hopefully this gets a little more attention.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of things getting more attention, apparently people forget and lose their passwords to their cryptocurrency wallets. So there's a company for that now, a company called Bunker. And I had a hard time understanding. I think they're selling to the companies who make the wallets and basically creating like some password recovery systems that you could use instead of just being screwed if you forget, your private key, your PIN, your passphrase, however you get into your cold wallet. Very much needed, because and like Joe Grand, Paul Asadorian was interviewing Joe Grand for a Hacker Heroes segment that will be published sometime in the near future, and that's what he does now. Like he started a consulting company that just tries to recover your Bitcoin and your cryptocurrency for you from the hardware wallets that you no longer know the passphrase for. So yeah, I think it's interesting that this is a whole market now.
Well, I think what's really interesting is, think about it this way: if the only way that somebody gets to the point where they have tens of millions, hundreds of millions, or billions of dollars in cryptocurrency is to have bought it at pennies, super early, said, hey, let's throw $1,000 in this thing,
completely
and then
forgot about it. Yeah.
That's the only way you get there, because everybody's got a price well before hundreds of millions of dollars where you will have sold that off, right? Where you have said the risk is just too great to hold on to it indefinitely. So you've got all these companies, and I don't know the exact number. I'll throw a random number out there, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of lost keys that are propping up Bitcoin and Ether and sitting there unable to be recovered, unable to be sold. People that have, put $100 or $1,000 in when it was, a quarter of a penny or something. And hey, so if you're Joe Grand, hey, you know what? Give me your lost wallets that you don't have keys for anymore. If I can pop it, I get 1%. I get 2%, right? Some small negligible amount. All I got to do is pop one of those wallets, and I'm set for life.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. You mentioned Joe Grand was actually releasing a video today. I don't know if that came out. Yes, it did. It came out earlier today. Hacking a Samsung Galaxy for $6 million. It's a Samsung Galaxy phone with $6 million worth of Bitcoin locked on it.
Wow.
So let me grab that, and I'll drop that in the in both the chats here. That looks like his last one. Like, the production was great. He's got like professional crew producing these videos.
Well, Joe used to be on Discovery Channel. He had his own show on Discovery Channel.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But definitely worth a watch. So that's something I'll save for later. All right, moving on here. I'm going to do a bit of a speed run through some of the new products here and some of the news items here, and then I'll pause and we'll see if there's anything to discuss across them. But speaking of attack surface management, pops up again because IBM acquired Randori, which is one of the more mature external attack surface management companies. Looks like Aqua Security made an acqui-hire and hired both Darkbit founders. I was not familiar with Darkbit. No surprise, it was just two people apparently. They're not calling it an acquisition or an acqui-hire, but I mean that's exactly what it sounds like it is. 1Password joined the FIDO Alliance. Always good to see that. I actually use 1Password for my MFA in addition to using it as a password database. So I use it for authentication as well. So it's interesting to see those two worlds kind of combining. Let's see. Contrast Security made some of their, I think they have SAST tools, were they a RASP vendor? Tyler would know the answer to this, but they made some of their tools free.
Yeah, I don't know which tools they made free. I haven't dove into the article itself, but they originally were a IAST/RASP style vendor. I think they added SAST and DAST over the years to become a more well-rounded platform. So I'm not exactly sure which components they're making free.
Yeah, they call it CodeSec, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of details on what kind of a scanner it is.
Looks like code.
Yeah,
code and
looks like it might be
application scanning.
Yeah, and serverless. Interesting. Does Java and Python Lambda functions as well. Cool. Yeah, Java, JavaScript, .NET. Yeah, so it's scanning static stuff. Yeah. Cool. Welcome, I'm sure. Rumble is nuts. The speed at which they add features to the product is crazy. I get the updates as soon as they do it because I used a free version. And they've got a ton of integrations now. So they integrate with, what was the latest one they added? So they've added Azure and AWS and Google Cloud, so they can pull in all your assets from there. They can pull in all your assets from CrowdStrike and SentinelOne. And the recent one they added is Tenable.io and Tenable Nessus, so they can grab that as well. And they've got the Mirador MDM platform and VMware in there as well. So doing a lot more than just internal network scanning these days.
Yeah, they're gunning for us, Tyler. They're certainly putting out a lot of information and updating their features. So it's great because that certainly validates the space and the need to not just identify what you've got and not just do it through one product, but look at it through an ecosystem lens, and also understand, the dependencies, the vulnerabilities, what the risk is, all the things that Tyler and I talk and write about all day long. So yeah. They're certainly making good strides in the space for sure.
And they're not just getting asset data out of Tenable. They are pulling in vulnerability data, like the vulnerability description, CVSS score, the CVE number, all that stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's becoming almost table stakes. You can't just have asset data without any correlation to vulnerabilities, and it just doesn't make any sense because you look at everything you have, and if you don't know where the problems are, so what? So you have a bunch of stuff.
All right, two more things and we'll wrap here. There's an interesting open source tool called Anamark. This is my story number 17. And I can't remember if this is linked to a company, but French developers here, what they've done is they've created something that can build a model based off of how... So we were talking about this a bit earlier. I think it was either Aqua or Twistlock or maybe both of them that would baseline your containers. And anything they didn't see run while training it, they would not allow to run in production. And this kind of does a similar thing where you can train it on payloads on command line data sets is what they're calling it. And I don't know, maybe you feed it bash histories. I'm not sure what command lines they're looking for here. But if they see anything weird on the command line that isn't normal, it can let you know. So I thought this is a really interesting piece of software that could be used in some creative ways, I think in maybe like an XDR platform or something like that.
Yeah, sounds like an interesting feature.
Mm-hmm. And it's free. It's on GitHub.
That's the best kind of features are the free features.
Oh, I lied. There's still two more things I'm going to mention. Microsoft Defender launches for Mac OS, iOS, and Android in addition to Windows. So now everybody can run Defender. It's open for everybody. You can install it everywhere.
Microsoft eats the world.
It's now cross-platform. And I do believe that's the endpoint security Microsoft Defender, not one of the other 24 Microsoft Defender products that I cannot keep up with or keep straight. It's not my fault. Microsoft does this on purpose. All right, and our squirrel story for today is this lovely story of how Git became to be. Back in the day, Linux used...
Story time with Adrian.
Story time with Adrian. And so apparently there's this product called BitKeeper that's like a source control product. And it was normally a paid product. And there's no timeline in here. So I have to assume this is in like the 90s, like the very early Linux days, or at the very latest early 2000s. And BitKeeper gave Linux a special deal, gave Linus Torvalds a special deal to use their source control product for free. And then at some point, they decided, hey, we're going to have to start charging you. And, they said, you're going to have to pay it. Like, it would take you forever to build what we put together here. And 4 days later, Git was born. Like, Linus just built it, in half a week. And kicked BitKeeper to the curb. And that's how Git was born. And it goes deeper. If you go through the thread a little bit, it's worth taking some time and reading through some of the additional items that he posts here. And this is who is this? Swix. It doesn't say his name, but SWYX on Twitter. But it's the last story on the list, 23 here, and it's a lovely read about how and BitKeeper's still around apparently. Same guy that gave Linus the free deal back in the 90s or whenever that was, is still around. He didn't take it too hard. GitHub sold to Microsoft for how much? And they're still like a 13-person company or 16-person company or something like that. But they're still around.
Yeah, so I thought that just goes to show you, don't piss off the real smart people.
Find a way to work with them, I guess. Yeah, I mean, it's it was fascinating. But good story to go check out. And that's about all we have for today. So, Tyler, Katie, thanks so much for joining me today on this slightly shorter version, one segment shorter than normal episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
Hey, great
seeing you guys. There's another recorded segment coming up.
Yeah, but it doesn't have us.
I know, but I don't want listeners to drop off and think we're slacking. Tyler's going to sleep. He's slacking.
Yeah, but
I might have been, but fathead Tyler back here behind me was paying a lot of attention. So it's all good. Fathead Tyler. Thank you, Adrian, for Story Time with Adrian. That actually kept me energized, kept me engaged today. I appreciate Story Time with Adrian.
Big Head Tyler is ever energized.
He is. He's always smiling. Always.
Does it hurt him the way it hurts you?
To smile? Yes, constantly.
He's in constant pain. All right. Next up, we've got a pre-recorded segment from RSA where Chris Cleveland, CEO of Pixum, and Mehul Ravnkar, VP Product Management at Qualys, will discuss stopping phishing attacks and a fresh approach to reducing cyber risk. And but we're done for the day. That's the last you'll hear from us. So big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. That last segment's coming up just a moment here, and we will see you next week. Bye.